All right, so you want to know what the critics are saying about Joker? Folie, Deux, huh? Well, let's dive right into these Metacritic reviews. See what's got everyone, especially fans of the first film, so riled up.
Okay, so the Metascore. It's sitting at a 54, which Metacritic, they call that mixed or average,
Yeah.
right? But,
Don't let that fool you.
right, a 54, that doesn't necessarily mean bad.
Not at all. Could be a very good sign, actually.
Yeah, how so?
Well, think about it. A score in the 50s, that usually means a film is smell still.
Yeah.
Well, it's stirring things up, got people talking, you know. And from what I'm seeing, this one, oh yeah, it's definitely doing that.
Definitely interesting, especially with this whole musical direction Phillips went with.
Right, bold choice.
But one thing critics seem to agree on no matter what. Joaquin Phoenix, Lady Gaga, powerhouse performances.
Oh, absolutely. Even the reviews that weren't completely sold on the film as a whole, they couldn't deny the acting.
Especially Gaga.
Especially Gaga. She became Harley Quinn. Critics are blown away by her, and that's saying something. Harley's a tough role to make your own, but she did it.
You know, I'm thinking back to our last deep dive and how much you loved the dark tone of the first Joker film. This one, it sounds like it goes even deeper into that psychological intensity.
Oh, it does, without a doubt. And visually, Phillips really pushed the envelope. Took what he did in Joker and, I don't know, amplified it. And those musical sequences, they're woven right into the fabric of the film.
Really?
Yeah, he blends the music with Arthur's, his mental state. Very effective, some critics said. Others, not so much.
So it's divisive then.
Very much so. Some loved it, called it innovative. Others found it jarring, disruptive to the flow of the story.
Makes sense. So let's talk about those criticisms a bit. The pacing especially seems to be a sticking point for a lot of reviewers.
Yeah, which is interesting because runtime-wise, it's not actually that much longer than the first one, but all those musical numbers,
They add up.
some critics felt they did. Like the movie felt longer, even if it wasn't. Needed a tighter edit, maybe?
You think so?
That seems to be the consensus among some of the critics, at least. They felt the pacing issues were part of a larger problem with the film's execution. A little uneven.
It's interesting you say that because you used the word ambition earlier, and it does sound like some critics felt like maybe the execution didn't quite live up to that ambition.
Yeah, and, when you try to do that much, sometimes not everything lands perfectly,
Right. It's definitely a risk going for that kind of ambitious vision. And those musical numbers, talk about a syringe.
Definitely not your typical comic book movie.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what makes all these different reactions so interesting. Some critics are saying Phillips deserves a round of applause just for, daring to do something this different with the genre. And then others, they're like, stick to the script, man. Give us a good, solid story.
Right. It's almost like two different camps.
Totally. But it does seem like no matter what, Phillips doubled down on the character study aspect this time. The focus, from what I'm reading, it's all on Arthur and Harley and their relationship.
It is, and it gets intense. I mean, you were fascinated by their dynamic in the first film, right?
Oh yeah.
This one, it's like they put that whole messed up dance under a microscope, gets into the madness, the codependency, that line between love and obsession. Totally blurred.
Wow. So what about Gotham, though? I mean, in the first movie, Gotham was practically its own character. Did that come through in the sequel?
See, that's where some critics felt the film was lacking. They said Gotham felt kind of sidelined. Even some of the supporting characters, like all the focus went into Arthur and Harley and their downward spiral and everything else, kind of faded to the background.
Interesting. So it's less about, the societal collapse that we saw fueling the first film and more about this very internal implosion between these two characters.
Exactly. And some critics, they saw that as a missed opportunity. Like they wanted more of the bigger picture stuff from the first Joker. But others, they argue that it actually strengthened the film, made the storytelling more intimate, more psychologically driven.
Wow. So it seems like you either really connect with this film and what Phillips is going for, or you don't. Not a lot of middle ground.
You said it. It's a movie that makes you react, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's what makes it so interesting. Even if you come away with some mixed feelings, it's a piece of art that makes you feel something,
Absolutely. And speaking of strong reactions and kind of going back to something you said earlier, this film is part of this whole trend in comic book movies, right? Like more and more, we're seeing filmmakers take risks, explore these darker themes. It's almost like they're trying to redefine what these stories can be.
100%. It's like we're moving away from just pure entertainment,
Right.
All those explosions and fight scenes. They're still there sometimes, But it's not just about that anymore, these movies. They're trying to be smarter, make you think, even be art.
Right. So instead of the classic good guy, bad guy thing, it's more about the gray areas, right? The messiness of real life, but with supervillains and capes and all that.
Exactly. It's like, what makes these characters tick? What makes them good? What makes them bad? And Joker, Folie, Deux. Man, it throws gasoline on that fire. It makes you really ask those questions like, what do we want from these movies? Can a comic book movie be more than just a popcorn flick?
Can it be art?
Yeah. And can it be art that, like not everyone loves? Art that starts arguments, makes you think for weeks after you've seen it.
That's a good point. It's like Phillips is making a statement. He's not afraid of ticking people off, you know?
Not at all.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that's kind of refreshing. Especially, well, we've talked about your taste in films. You like the dark stuff, the psychological thrillers, and this one really makes you work for it.
Love that. Okay, so anyone listening who's planning on seeing Joker, Folie Deux, which, let's be real, you probably are after this deep dive, what advice would you give them?
You get with an open mind. Don't expect the usual comic book movie. Expect to be challenged. Expect to be maybe even a little disturbed. Embrace the darkness. Embrace the ambition, even if it doesn't always work perfectly.
And then come back here, right? Check out those Metacritic reviews.
Exactly. See what other people thought and see if you agree. Maybe write your own review. We'll put a link in the show notes so you can find them easily.
Perfect. Well, this deep dive has been a wild ride. Until next time, keep asking those big questions. And remember, sometimes it's the movies that divide us the most that actually get us thinking the hardest.